They stay vigilant so we can sleep peacefully. They stand guard so we can be at rest. They put their lives on the line so we can live ours without fear. But who looks after the hero's heart? Welcome to Hero's Heart with Chaplain Dan Middlebrooks, President and CEO of Chaplaincy Care Incorporated, which, according to Psalm 28:7, focuses on protecting the hearts of our heroes, our first responders. Learn more at chaplaincycare.org. Now your host, Chaplain Dan Middlebrooks.
Hey, I want to welcome everybody back as we continue in our small series of SAF Talk. Last time we talked about it, it was about keeping your words simple. And for those of you that are just joining with me, just as a quick review, SAF Talk is an opportunity for you as a first responder to be able to connect and to communicate into the world of your spouse that so desperately wants to be a part of your world. Not about seeing what you see, but about seeing you in the process. And that SAF Talk reminds us of how we develop a constructive and safe communication that allow both of you to be able to grow together without necessarily grossing each other out by what you see. The S stood for simple, keeping our words simple and actually going beyond our words by our thoughts and our actions as well as in our feelings. But today we're going to deal with the A in the SAF, and that is about the words that you agree upon. And really, when it gets right down to that, it's finding the common ground that both you and your spouse need to be a part of. Now, here's something that's very, very important. Men think like men, women think like women. That's not going to be able to bridge the gap in between that. So that's why it's so important for you when you begin to start developing the words that is going to be necessary in order to keep the communication safe when you have to explain something that you've been a part of or where you're at or even a trauma that you've had to go through. These words are not necessarily going to be universal. Your word may mean completely something different to her. Came across a book by the name of Terry Felber. It was called Am I Making Myself Clear? What a great book. And basically in the book, he talks about how people have a different representational system, based on their five senses and the basis for their thoughts and their feelings that come together. He gives an example of, if several people were walking down the beach together, their recollections of the experience, would be different based upon their filters or, in a sense, their representational system of how they take everything in. One might remember how the sun felt on the skin and the sand on his feet. Another might remember the look of the water and the vivid colors of the sunset. A third might be able to describe the sounds of the oceans, the birds, and others, as well as maybe the smell and the salty air of the tanning lotion nearby of the person. Each person, what I'm talking about, creates a framework for that way to process information. That's why it's so important that we do not simply approach it as a one-size-fits-all. If both you and I say this loud enough for me to understand it, but if you and I can learn to pinpoint how the experiences around our spouse impact them, and then really try to experience the same world as she or he does, then you'll be amazed of how effective your communication is about to become. It's really a very simple way by which you look at developing a common ground whenever you talk and share together. Now, there's a couple of things that I want you to realize in this episode as we talk about the agreed upon words, the common ground that's going to be established, is that there are sometimes some barriers to that. Things that will mess us up in the process. There's probably a whole bunch of them, but let me just give you, what I call my top four. These are ones that seem to mean a lot in my life that I've experienced or I have seen through all of my years of communication and counseling and talking with couples. And so one of the first ones, and I think this was more mine as I began in marriage over 33 years ago, it was based upon an assumption about that I already knew what my wife, knew and felt and wanted and things of that nature. You know what I'm assuming usually does, and I'll just kind of leave it for that. Jerry Ballard says this: all miscommunication are a representation of differing assumptions, which means, have you ever said something to your wife and you meant it one way and she took it another way. Or wives, when you've said something to your husbands and he has that look in his face like, I have no idea what you were talking about. Well, here's what happens in reference to that assumption-based communication. It's when we try to make our spouse a carbon copy of us. Guys, it just doesn't work. That's why two are joining together, and to become one, basically it means that you don't need a carbon copy, or else the pieces just don't fit. Because like the old theologian Rocky Balboa, remember him? He says, Adrian's got gaps, I got gaps. Together, we ain't got no gaps. What a great way to put it. Is because the assumptions that we have can sometimes bite us in the end if we simply think that we know it all rather than asking. So that's one of the big first ones right there that I see just in my life, and I see in the lives of others. Another one is simply a part of what I call indifference, or that apathy. And sadly, in some places, in some couples, it's just that they just don't care. One person may just not care about what the other wants to know or feel or do. It's that sort of ambivalence of just kind of going along with it. There are people that are easygoing, and then there are people that are just going easy, and that means that they just don't care. They're not going to invest a lot into that. And so, when you're wanting to develop a communication with your spouse, especially with your spouse and with your children, ladies and gentlemen, it takes time. It takes energy to do that. You cannot just go with the flow, because I guarantee you what usually flows out of your mouth is not what you wanted to say. Ever been there before? That as soon as it came out of your mouth, you said, I didn't mean to say that. It's kind of where we wish the inner voice would just stay and not the outer voice come out. So that's another one. So another one that can really be a barrier to that common ground is that aspect of always wanting to be in control. Or really, when you get right down to it, it is worse than an indifference, because you just don't want others to know what you want to know or what you want to share. It's a process of developing a mentality that that really just doesn't do anything. It is what I call the Al Capone mentality. Let me explain what I mean that. Al Capone simply saying this: if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. Yeah, that doesn't work either. That type of control is more than just pushing a rope. It is actually causing everything to be snarled up. And when communication gets snarled up like that, no one is going to go anywhere fast. It's going to be stuck right there. And one of the last barriers just to touch on is just what I call arrogance. It is that I know it all. I know what needs to happen, or better yet, I don't really need to know it because you need to adjust to me. When we talk about a lot of the controversies that arise in life, it usually comes from the result of misunderstandings. And it's not really from one man not knowing the facts and the other one which not seem too important. Otherwise, it's really getting down to where they fail to value each other's point of view. Do you see that point right there? Because arrogance simply says, I don't need to value your point of view. You just need to follow mine. That's almost like that control one. But really, it's about the arrogance, all about me rather than about we. That's where we get into it. It makes it very, very important that as we start moving forward, we make the right choices to agree upon the right words to develop the common ground. So we looked at some of the barriers. What are some of the considerations that we need to have that help us in the right choices of developing that agreed upon word to make our communication safe? One is that it starts with listening. When you listen to your spouse, you are giving them one of the greatest gifts that anyone can ever give, and that is the gift of being heard. It's in a sense, I'm simply going to listen my way to common ground. Those are the words, the actions, and the connections. Basically, it gets us out of the me first factor so that we simply just allow ourselves to listen. Listening requires giving up our favorite human pastime, according to Sonia Hamlin, and that involves ourselves and our own interests. She goes on to write, it is our primary, entirely human focus, and it is where our motivation to do anything comes up. With this as a basis, you can see what a problem is created when we're asked to listen to someone else when we only want to hear ourselves. Wow. Listening simply means that I'm just going to shut up. I guess that's why God gave me two ears and one mouth. And probably is I usually open my mouth up so much that I have put my foot in my mouth so much that I have athlete's tongue. Probably some of you know what I'm talking about. So what's another choice that we can make to get at that developed ground? It's not just listening, but it's also about being available. It's about choosing to spend time with each other. The more you sit, the more you talk, the more you share, the more you dream, the more you get to know each other's heart. And that's really what develops the safety of the talk, because when you start sharing the words that you need to be able to develop that help to keep traumatic events safe when you're sharing and being a part of each other's world, especially as law enforcement, fire and rescue, and military and security, you're able to know what words are going to resonate better with that, which kind of leaves me sort of another choice, just to ask the questions. It's about being interested enough to ask your spouse, okay, when I say this word, what does this word mean to you? Remember with the example that I gave in my wife and I, when I was going into Iraq, I used the word hard. Now, hard for a hard day meant that it was a bloody day. A very hard day meant that we lost a lot of lives. We agreed upon that definition. So it gets right down to just asking questions. What does it mean to you? Again, think about the beach. You know, most guys, when we're walking on the beach, we may be looking around. I'm usually looking, saying, so where's the closest food truck? That's where I'm looking at. And my wife may be looking at the waves and the birds and stuff like that. So we take in different. We're at the same beach, just the viewpoints are different. So I need to ask her, as she needs to ask me, what do these words mean to us? Openness is a part of that. That openness basically says that I want to let you into my life. That is vulnerability. But we're going to talk at another time about the loss of vulnerability in our society and what that does to impact us in a very powerful way. So I want you to stay tuned for a future episode that goes on to that. But the choice I need to make in order to find a common ground with my wife is an openness that says, I want you into my world. Now, granted, there are some things that I need to protect her from my world. But in the same place, my heart is now given to her. It's not about impacting her with the darkness that is seen and with the evil of mankind and with the atrocities that I have to be a part of, especially as a chaplain. It is about helping her to still be a part of my life so that she is still a part of the sunshine when it seems like I have a long, dark night of the soul, because that begins to start developing the thoughtfulness, which is another choice, that allows me to look for ways by which I can connect with her and ways that she can connect with me. It's a part of bringing everything together and making sure that that communication is going to be sure and steadfast. Looking at different situations in our life, one of the things that I often come across are funny stories about the power and the impact of common ground, or better yet, of communicating well. And this one I'm going to leave you with because it's about a bank robber by the name of Jorge Rodriguez. Now, Jorge Rodriguez was an Old West bank robber from Mexico who operated along the Texas border around the 1900s. Rodriguez was so successful that the Texas Rangers established a special force to try to stop him. Late one afternoon, one of these special rangers saw Rodriguez slipping across the border back into Mexico, and he trailed him at a discreet distance. He watched as the outlaw returned to his home village, and he mingled with the people in the square when Rodriguez went into his favorite cantina to relax. The old ranger slipped in, and he managed to get the drop on him with his pistol to the bank robber's head. The lawman said, "Jorge Rodriguez, I know who you are, and I've come to get back all the money that you have stolen from the banks in Texas. Unless you give it to me, I'm going to blow your brains out." Now, Rodriguez could see the man's badge, and he could discern his hostile intent. But there was a problem. Jorge Rodriguez didn't speak English. He began speaking rapidly in Spanish, but the ranger could not understand what he said because he didn't speak Spanish. Just then, a young boy came up and said in English, "Can I help? I speak English and Spanish. Do you want me to be your translator?" The ranger nodded. The boy quickly explained everything the ranger had said. Nervously, Rodriguez says, "Tell the big Texas Ranger that I have not spent a cent of the money. If he will go to the town well, face north, count down 5 stones, he will find a loose one there. Pull it out, and all of the money is behind there. Please tell him quickly." The boy looked back at the ranger and said, "Senor, Jorge Rodriguez is a very, very brave man, and he says that he is prepared to die." Poor Jorge Rodriguez. He just needed to make sure he could speak the right language to develop the common ground that would save his neck. And maybe that's a good thought for all of us, that when we develop the common ground, the agreed upon words in Safe Talk, life comes a lot easier. Hey, look forward to talking to you next time.
You've been listening to Hero's Heart with Chaplain Dan Middlebrooks, President and CEO of Chaplaincy Care Incorporated. Learn what you can do to protect the hearts of our heroes, our first responders, at chaplaincycare.org.